Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's video, we're discussing the role of generative AI in software development. We'll be looking at technologies like DevOps, infrastructure as code, and pipeline as code. We'll also talk about vulnerability and security assessments, which are crucial aspects of the development process. To discuss that, I'm joined by an industry expert. With me is Aju Mathew, Vice President, Software Engineering at Aspire Systems. Aju, very good to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me here, James. Nice to be here.
All right, we know that generative AI plays a large and growing role in software development. Specifically, in terms of DevOps, how does Gen AI play a role in infrastructure as code?
Well, on the DevOps side, specifically on infrastructure as code perspective, DevOps resources can use generative AI platforms to generate scripts, and these scripts could be for ARM or Terraform templates to basically automatically provision infrastructure like networking, servers, operating systems, or storage in different supported programming languages, both within the cloud or on-prem. This would help in basically reducing the time to build IAC templates or infrastructure as code templates, James.
Mm-hmm. What about pipeline as code? What's driving this development with generative AI?
From a pipeline as code perspective, again, DevOps users can use these platforms to generate build scripts for build tools like namely Bamboo, Jenkins, Gradle, Maven, etc. Now, generated build scripts would follow industry best practices. And that's how, I would say, pipeline as code being impacted using Gen AI.
Well, yeah, vulnerability and security assessments are definitely a crucial aspect of the development process. What advice do you give to companies on usage of Gen AI in this sector?
There are two potential areas where Gen AI platforms can help in the vulnerability and security assessment. One is, firstly, is a preventive scenario where the backend API or the front-end code generated by the Gen AI platform already follows the best practices to avoid any vulnerability and security glitches. All this can happen through prompt chaining with the right parameters. So this is more of a preventive mechanism. And from a reactive scenario, which is the second scenario, where current vulnerability and security assessment tools that we currently use, both static and dynamic, which currently follows a template or rules-based identification of issues, would shift to a Gen AI-based detection mechanism. So all the tool providers in this space would be using Gen AI. So that's how we see both the preventive and reactive scenarios panning out.
Well, I mean, do you think these use cases, whether it's pipeline as code or vulnerability and security assessments, are people using Gen AI to do this now, or is it still on the way and a futuristic concept?
As far as the preventive scenario, it is something that is current, which basically means anything that you generate code with the right parameters, it will be compliant. Basically, there won't be any vulnerability or security glitches. It again depends on how you instruct the platform to generate. So it is something which is already existing. Whereas on the reactive side, it is still futuristic in the sense tool providers on the vulnerability and security assessment tools, they need to start incorporating Gen AI into their tools so that they use Gen AI instead of template or rules-based.
Well, all right, let's look to the future. If you look in your crystal ball, what is your sense of the future of generative AI in DevOps and security assessments?
Yeah, that's a interesting question. And to me, in the future of DevOps, I would probably expect DevOps users to be able to generate both, especially the infrastructure as code, using inputs using application deployment architecture documents as an input. And I would see generative AI going and parsing that document, identifying the parameters needed to generate infrastructure as code. So that is something that we would look forward to, in the coming years, because instead of keying in all the parameters needed, it just reads the deployment architecture document as part of the life cycle, and then takes that as an input to generate infrastructure as code. So that's on IAC standpoint. Similarly, from a pipeline as code standpoint, the future that I would see is that generative AI platforms using the application architecture or design document as the input, and the input would be in terms of what programming language am I using, what are the modules and libraries and associated dependencies, and using all of this as input, basically generating pipeline as code. Pretty advanced, but I'm sure it's possible in the near term. And if you go into future of security assessments, I would expect more of a preventive mechanism, because just like DevOps, we would have already heard of DevSecOps, right? So I'm anticipating concepts of DevSecOps getting implemented using GenAI platforms with basically end-to-end security incorporation, during application design, development, test, build, and infrastructure provisioning. So it's basically end-to-end security implementation using GenAI chips.
The DevSecOps is, I think, particularly interesting. Do you think that's right around the corner, or is it a couple years away?
See, DevSecOps already exists as a best practice nowadays.
Sure.
It's just a question of using the DevSecOps concept when you, use GenAI platforms to generate, the stuff that you want in the different SDLC phases, right? Right from design to infrastructure provisioning.
Mm-hmm.
So it will take time for it to reach this stage, but the concept of DevSecOps exists. It's just incorporating that into GenAI platforms for the through the SDLC cycle.
All right. Well, it's going to be a fascinating area to watch. Aju, I really appreciate your sharing expertise today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James.